Hello, humans, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Gamer. Well, I'm here in the laundry room, recording and reflecting. I'm sorting whites and colors here, but I want to remind you now that the Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES, if you will, is 38 years old. 38! Happy birthday, Nintendo Entertainment System. 38. Can you grasp that number? Right? Some of you listening to this recording might not even be 38. Most of my audience is in their 40s, so maybe you guys were, a couple of years old, 5, 7. Maybe it was your first console. But how times have changed, right? And I would say not for the better, right? When this came out, it was the big 80s. I've talked about it before, but, I'm really just reflecting on how much time has gone by. There were many drivers for me as I reminisce. There were many drivers for me to buy the NES, just because I love video games at that point. In that time, at the age I was, I shouldn't have been playing video games. I should have supposedly grown out of it by that time, right? But, I had my high school job and I saved money to buy the system. And one of my primary drivers was to play Kung Fu. The Kung Fu game seemed so realistic to me. It was like arcade perfect, right? At that time with an 8-bit machine, right? But I wanted that experience. And, a lot of the reasons, for example, when I made my top 10 list of games that I wasted money on, Kung Fu, wasn't on there because I was playing it on the NES, right? And just like Donkey Kong could have made it, but I got my ColecoVision and, I was playing on ColecoVision. But Nintendo, starting with the ColecoVision and their Donkey Kong games, that was the genesis, right? For what became the NES, and I remember playing Gradius. Of course, I remember playing Mario. And, now as I sit here as a grandfather, right? From being a teenager to a grandfather, you get a different perspective, right? And it's not just nostalgia, right? It really just isn't. There was a purity to video games then that isn't here now, right? When it came to video games at that point, right? At that point, because there was no social media, of course, when you talked about video games with somebody, it's because they truly love video games. And many of you listening, to these type of videos love video games as, when you make videos that are, about more popular video games, for example, you get a lot more audience. And with that, you get divergent point of views. You get trolled, you get, more toxicity. But back then, people that you would talk to specifically, through magazines, through clubs, because there's no internet, right? Through clubs, through your friends, gatherings, you talk about video games, and it was always a source of unity for people. If I had to reflect on the biggest difference, in pop culture that has changed, is that when we spoke about video games then, it was always for the purpose of unification, of friendship or camaraderie. And of course there was disagreements, once the Sega Genesis came out, right? Once you had competitors. But for the most part, even then, when the NES first came out, it was just gangbusters, guys. There wasn't anything else anybody would talk about. They would sell out so soon. And, because they were expensive, you cherished every game. You didn't have the availability that you do to games today. I literally, right now, have thousands and thousands of games to choose from at that moment in time, right? We didn't have that. So games that were actually good were cherished by people, were experiences that, you would have, once, twice, share it with your friends, exchange cartridges. There was a lot more in-person dialogue because you had to, again, no social media, right? And there was a lot more reading going on. People hate to read, man, and at least I would exert. If you're not a reader, at least do audiobooks. And if you don't like reading, write. And that's one of the biggest things that I see. That right now, it's the lowest common denominator content is the one that is rewarded on YouTube, but it's not necessarily the most fulfilling, right? If you have something to say out there, put it on paper, man. Put it on the YouTubes, share it with people. And if I took any lessons from that era, from that period of time to today, is that, we should share our feelings. A lot of it back then, for those of us who played video games, at least in my neighborhood, right? There were really refuges. We were really refugees from the street going indoors because we didn't want to go outside, right? Many of us couldn't, right? Many of us didn't like what was going on. We didn't like, and I can only tell you my stories. A lot of us didn't like gang culture. We didn't like street culture. Any time of the day, I'd rather be playing a video game than anything that was going outside my door many times. And when the NES came out, it was the best representation of video games that we had it to that point. The gameplay was so superior to the Atari that it made you want to stay home. It really made you want to gather with your friends, sit around, have them get player 2, depending on the game. Sometimes you wouldn't want to share. But you go back and remember the Contras, remember Mario, you remember Gradius, you remember Ninja Gaiden. I mean, these were gaming experiences that you would share with people and talk about positively, right? Nobody was talking back then about how Mario sucked or, what gender was Mario. None of that, stuff. It was just strictly about the game, how enjoyable the game was, if you found any Easter eggs, if you found any tricks, what have you. A lot of that is missing. You can't really dedicate yourself to those endeavors anymore because people don't play together, right? You play online, and when you're online, man, human nature, right? Human nature comes out. And let's just say the interactions with people that you might have are not going to be as positive as they were back in the day. But you know what? It's what you make of it. Choose your friends wisely. Choose your games wisely and how you interact. But man, to think that it's 38 years, it's just mind-blowing. How has your life changed? What was your game back in the day? Man, and it's Christmas time, and when you played Nintendo at Christmas, man, there wasn't anything better than that. Oh, guys, I wish you guys have a great weekend. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one. I got to get this laundry done. Take care.